From the gorgeous campus of the University of Oregon, located in beautiful Eugene, Oregon, welcome to Matthew Knight Arena for the NCATA National Championships. Meet number 2 about to take off. Number 2, Azusa Pacific versus number 7, Fairmont State. And let's go ahead and look at the schedule so far right before we get into the opening event. Gannon just defeated Limestone, but we're going to move to the compulsory event as we're already off and underway. Again, welcome inside to Matthew Knight Arena. This is the compulsory event. It's going to be the compulsory acro. Fairmont State, the lower seed, is going to be competing first. And here go the Falcons.
So again, if you're just joining us for this meet, compulsory event are the foundational skills of acrobatics and tumbling, the building blocks to progress to more difficult skills throughout the meet and the optional portions of the event. Both teams are going to be competing the exact same skills in this event. All the start values are out of 10. The first heat we're watching now is the compulsory acro heat. Then we'll go into pyramid, toss, and tumbling. So again, all these skills will be identical between the two teams in this first event. So you're seeing the compulsory acro sequence. This is 3 sequences put together. It's actually a pretty long sequence compared to some of the sequences that we'll see in the acro event. So we're hitting the final part of the sequence here with the single twist all the way down to the cradle from the arabesque position. So we'll be able to look through some replays and tell a little bit more about the skills and the execution in this first heat. So we're starting with that toe pitch up to the shoulder level, and then the tops are doing a tuck off to the ground. And again, a big part of this is synchronization. So you see in the second part, they've got the shoulder climb to a straddle position, a little bit low on those straddle positions. They're supposed to be at 90-degree angles. And you can see a little bit of synchronization there as they went over to the inverted position. The final part of the sequence there, that arabesque into the twist down. The officials are also going to be looking at the catches. So the top should be landing in a hollow body position, which is not quite flat, but a little bit of a curve in the body, but mostly flat. And so you can see a little bit there that the tops, if you see the shoulders up and the head kind of looking up right at you in the crowd, that's probably going to be a deduction. Or if you see the feet up higher in the air than the shoulders, that's also going to be a deduction. So if there's a piked position, that's what results in those head and feet being up. And we're looking for that hollow body position in the catch. Also looking for movement in the catch. So if the bases have to move to the side, if the top kind of, moves forward, they're going to see some different potential deductions there as well.
Again, if you're just joining us, this is the acro heat in the compulsory event. Fairmont State just opened us off. They're the lower seed. They're the 7 seed. 9-1 overall on the year. Azusa Pacific, they're the 2 seed, and they'll be competing right after Fairmont every single time. They'll alternate each heat. In the opening compulsory event, there are the 4 heats. We've talked about them, the acro, the pyramid, the toss, and the tumbling. And overall in an acrobatics and tumbling meet, there's 20 total heats and 6 events. The first half consists of the compulsory event, the acro event, and the pyramid event. There's going to be a 15-minute halftime break in between. And then the second half is the triple T's, the toss, the tumbling, and the team event. And again, there's 20 total heats. In the first half, the big thing is that the start values are all about 10. Compared to Fairmont State, they're going to have a little bit lower start values than Azusa Pacific. They're going to have not all 10 start values. You'll see a little bit of differentiation in the acro event. They're going to have a little bit lower start values in the pyramid event. They'll have a little bit lower of a start value than Azusa Pacific in the open pyramid. But overall, there's a lot of consistency. And in the compulsory event, it's the only event where the start values are all 10.
Yeah, they're all prescribed ahead of time. No optional portion here, so everyone's starting from a 10. So we see that toe pitch. Wow, look at the height on those toe pitches to the shoulder level. And then the tuck off. And then the tuck, you want to see those knees, come all the way to the chest. Or excuse me, to a 90-degree, not all the way to the chest. And the climb up there to the straddle position. So you want to see 90 degrees there in the straddle positions. That's the pop over to the inverted hold, and then that second base, they release from that second base. So you want to see really stable movement, not too much movement. You might see, the toes start to kind of flow a little bit right there didn't see much movement. And then the switch up, a little bit of some bobbles there on the switch up to the arabesque position. Again, those legs should be at 90 degrees. And a twist down, single twist down, 360 degrees to that catch. And you saw those hollow body positions we were talking about there in that catch.
So that was Azusa Pacific wrapping up the acro heat in the compulsory event. Saw a little bit of Jessica Gill right there, the top on the right side for the Cougars.
Yeah, so we look back at that here in that portion where, it's really stable transition here. So not a little bit of movement there in that group on the right. Those arabesque, I am not a trained official, but I see, that those legs, were a little bit below 90 degrees, so that could be a potential body position deduction. But overall, a really strong start for Azusa Pacific. Azusa Pacific and Fairmont State, two of the founding members of the NCATA, so programs that have been at this from the beginning. Both have been really successful over the years. Obviously, you said Azusa coming in as the 2 seed, 5-1. Their only loss in the regular season was here in their final meet of the season to the University of Oregon. They had some uncharacteristic mistakes in that meet. And so Coach Willard talked to us yesterday. She said that they've been working on that since then. They had kind of a long break compared to some other teams. So they really focused in on how to improve that and got creative in thinking about the mental aspects of coming back to the tournament, competing for 3 days during that time off.
Fairmont State now going to come out for the pyramid heat in the compulsory event.
So the compulsory pyramid is new this year. The compulsory committee reviews the skills that are competed in the compulsory event every 3 years to make sure that they're keeping pace with the progress and the evolution of the sport. So this is a new compulsory pyramid that these teams have been competing all season. Starts with 2 bases on the floor. The mid base goes to a thigh stand there. And then the top is going to twist up all the way up there to the top. You want to see that stability from the mid base and the top. They hold that position, then they come to the straddle. So you can see the straddle over there on the left, just a little bit, not quite at a 90-degree angle there. So that might be a slight deduction. And then they do that flip forward, 270 degrees of flip into the cradle. So a really strong start for Fairmont.
It's Fairmont State. Again, all start values in the compulsory are at a 10. And let's just walk the viewers through the scoring in the compulsory event and just the meet in total. How are teams scored in acrobatics and tumbling?
Yeah, well, there's execution deductions and neutral deductions. So execution is all about technique. So we're looking for, are their legs straight? Are they synchronization? In the catches, some of the things that we've talked about. Those are all the technical aspects. Neutral penalties can be assessed if a requirement's not met, so each heat has just certain requirements. The teams also submit all of their skills prior to the meet, not in compulsory, of course, because those are the same, but in the optional portion of the event. So if they, for some reason, don't compete what they have stated, they would receive a neutral penalty as well. So those are neutral penalties are typically larger deductions. The execution deductions are typically incremental. So it can be based on the severity of the error. So if it's a small error, a little, we talked a little bit about movement, in the structures, or, taking a step. Then some of those things can be, a small step versus a lunge. That's going to be a larger deduction for the lunge. In the stability, if you can see just a little bit of movement, but if there's a lot of movement and they're kind of struggling to make sure that the skill stays up, that's going to be a larger deduction.
Now Azusa Pacific is going to come out for the pyramid heat in the compulsory event.
So again, we'll see the same skills from Fairmont State here. So everything in compulsory is set to counts. And so all of that timing is part of the synchronization and part of the elements that can be judged. So again, really strong, again, from my eye, I'm seeing that Jessica Gill there on the right, but the straddle wasn't all the way up to that 90-degree position, so that could be a slight deduction for them as well. Overall, the structures look very stable. The timing was good, so I think there's going to see minimal with deductions here for Azusa Pacific in this heat.
Now, you mentioned the compulsory is set to accounting. If a team is a little bit off rhythm and they're not on the same counting, will they be deducted points even though they execute the skills to the best of their ability?
Yeah, if they aren't doing them to the counts, there is a potential deduction. And then also if they aren't doing them at the same time, there's a synchronization. That's a little bit of a tongue twister. Deduction. So there's kind of two possible things there. So if that answers the question.
Does answer the question. Halfway through the compulsory event, again, these teams competing the exact same skills in the compulsory event, and then after this event, that's when they have a little bit more free reign to do whatever they feel. But let's go ahead and talk about Fairmont State a little bit. 9-1 overall on the season. They lost to Gannon, who just defeated the 6-seeded Limestone Saints, and Gannon's a pretty good squad of their own, but for Fairmont State, losing to Gannon, it felt like that was the change in their season. That's when things really started to turn around for the Falcons. They started to improve.
Yeah, Coach Kutry said that they really saw their own potential there. They saw that they could go toe-to-toe with Gannon, and then they saw things that they needed to improve, things that there were potential progressions for, and really kind of went home, went to work, and progressed to go on and win the Mountain East Conference Championship.
Here's the Falcons again. This is the toss heat.
So we're going to see a back tuck. So again, what the officials are looking for, first and foremost, synchronization. In the toss, they're looking for the height of that skill. So as the top comes off of the base and the tossing group and the base, they want to see that skill go as high as it can in the air. You also want to see the tops fully extend their bodies and complete that skill at the top height of the toss. So, and then they also want to have full extension before they come back through and get caught in that hollow position. So tosses for me are the hardest to detect those errors. So I'm glad that I don't have to judge any toss events.
I would also argue that the tosses are the hardest skills to perform for these teams, especially in the compulsory where they have to be synchronized.
Yeah, the synchronization, thinking about the timing, you know, the muscle memory that takes over, that the coaches describe in the repetition that they do in these skills, but really working the timing and how much power each of those bases is putting into the timing and to get the toss. You know, the tops might be different sizes, different heights, and so that can all play a factor into making sure that's executed. But the overall, like you said, it's kind of the most dynamic because it's all done in the air, and the timing and the basing group of that, a lot of the focus is on the top because they're the one out there executing that aerial skill. But really the strength and the power comes from that basing group and their timing together as a whole group.
Azusa Pacific now coming out for the toss heat in the compulsory event.
So Azusa's been averaging a 9.95 in this heat, so expect great execution. So great height on those skills. You can see the extension of the top. You can see a little bit, as we look at the replay, the group on the right, there's a little bit of a movement in the catch there. So we'll start at the beginning. You can see the load in. All of this is meant to be synchronized. So you can see their timing, their synchronization is good, but you can see a little bit of a movement of that group as they sort of shift to the right. That's going to be a deduction in this heat for Azusa Pacific.
So that's the Cougars wrapping up the toss heat. We're already 3/4 the way through the compulsory event. We've done the acro, we've done the pyramid, we've done the toss. Now coming up is going to be the tumbling event, which is probably the hardest part of the compulsory. We talked a lot about trying to synchronize the tosses, but I think the tumbling, especially the standing tumbling, is the hardest part.
You're right, and along with acro, the acro heat of compulsory, it has the most elements to complete, and so it's harder to get a perfect score because there are so many people and so many elements. So we start out with standing tumbling, and like you said, the synchronization of that and the timing is very difficult, but the technique is also incredibly important. So we look at synchronization, we see a lot in the landings, but you also want to look at the height of the skills. In this first part of the sequence, there's the back tuck. So great start there. But then we're going to go into a straddle jump with a back tuck. So those straddles should be, all the way up to those 90 degrees. So there can be some potential deductions on the straddle jumps here for Fairmont State. And the timing of back handspring, back tuck. So that's where the officials are going to be looking for legs together, bent knees, those types of things, as well as the landings, having a chest up on their landing. In the running portion here, they're going to do a round off, back handspring, layout. You really want to see rise in the layout. So the round off the back handspring is meant to create some power and acceleration in the pass. And then the layout, you should see that rise, which we saw here. And then the landing is a stack landing. So there shouldn't be hops or steps on the final landing. So the officials, again, are going to look for that rise, making sure that there's good body position in the landing, and then also any movement on those landings.
That was Fairmont State in the tumbling heat of the compulsory event. Fairmont State from Fairmont, West Virginia. That's about 20 miles from the campus of West Virginia University in Morgantown. They're a Division II school in the Mountain East Conference, and they actually won the Mountain East this year. And that was their third straight Mountain East title, so they're quite the powerhouse in the Mountain East.
They sure are. We talked about them being one of the founding members of the NCATA, and they're also the driving force behind the creation of the Mountain East Conference. And the Commissioner Reed Amos, he came out and saw Fairmont State compete and, really fell in love with the sport and saw the strength and the power of the athletes and knew that there was interest, especially in the region. Other schools in the conference had added after Fairmont State, and so it started the momentum to add more programs to get the initial 6 programs needed for conference sponsorship. And that conference has just continued to grow up to 9 total members competing in acrobatics and tumbling now. So yeah, they are the pioneers in conference sponsorship, and we're so thankful because they set the table then for Conference Carolinas to host a conference tournament, and we're seeing growth within some of our regions of our current members and within their conferences to hopefully have more and more conferences sponsoring tournaments in addition to the postseason with the NCATA and hopefully down the line an NCAA championship.
Absolutely, and the sport, they just got their 40th and 41st member, meaning that it's going to begin NCAA competition in the next few years. This sport just continues to grow, and it's very exciting.
Yes, it's incredibly exciting. It's a huge milestone. There's been a lot of work going from 6 original members all the way up to 41 institutions that are sponsoring a program. We just had our 40th Morgan State University and our 41st Duquesne University announced recently in the last month. And it's a huge milestone. It's a testament to all the women and men as well. We always say 4 women by women and a few good men that have really been supportive over the years in moving the sport forward, creating something that fits in the NCAA model and serves this population of young women who were not having the opportunities to go compete at the varsity level in an NCAA sport.
Here's Azusa Pacific in the tumbling heat in the compulsory event.
So again, as you're watching standing tumbling at home, you want to watch for the synchronization, but you also want to watch for those landings. You want to look at the height of the skills. Again, on this back handspring, legs together, chest up on landing. Oh, a little flare on the transition over to the running tumbling portion. And then we'll see that round off back handspring. Layout, round off back handspring layout. Left the last part off. So a strong start for Azusa Pacific. I'm sure they're going to be really pleased with that. Overall, they've been, averaging really high scores in the compulsory tumbling heat throughout the season. A 9-1 on average and a 38.65 overall in the event. So it's a strong, something that they look to start strong in. Make sure they set the table for the rest of the meet and all their competitions.
So that was Azusa Pacific in the tumbling heat, and how about that little bit of flair they did right between the standing tumbling and the running tumbling right here?
Yeah, nice little move. A lot of fun. That's the fun thing about this sport. It's so joyous, and for all of the, specificity and the technique, there's a lot of fun to be had. And so it's great to see the athletes out there being creative and having a little fun as they transition from standing to running.
So that wraps up the compulsory event. All 4 heats are done. Again, all start values in the compulsory are a start value of 10, so there's 40 total points that potentially could be earned by these teams. Right now, the officials are putting in their scores, but right now we're going to step aside and take a break. But when we come back, we're going to have the compulsory scores, and then we'll have the acro event here at the NCATA National Championships. Welcome back inside to Matthew Knight Arena. Let's go ahead and look at the scores for the compulsory event. Azusa Pacific 9.250 in the acro. Fairmont State 8.875 in the pyramid heat. Azusa Pacific 9.775. Fairmont State 9.600 in the toss heat. 9.775 for Azusa Pacific. 9.600 for Fairmont State. In the tumbling heat, Azusa Pacific 8.975 and Fairmont State 8.650. Total, Azusa Pacific 37.775, Fairmont State 36.725. So Azusa Pacific with a little bit of a lead to start. They are the 2 seed taking on the 7 seed. And right now we're going to move on to the acro event, and let's give you guys an explanation.
And next up is the acro event.
This begins the optional portion of the meet.
Each team will compete different skills with different possible start values.
There will be between 2 and 4 athletes on the floor in each heat.
Heat 1 has 5 elements, Heat 2 has 6 elements, and Heat 3 has 7 elements.
The start value is determined by the difficulty and combination of each sequence.
This event shows power, strength, and balance, so look for stability of the structure and position of the top.
So those are the rules for the acro event, and Azusa Pacific, who is the 2 seed, they're historically known as an acro team.
Yes, they are. They have some incredible acrobatic gymnastic spaces that join the program. Seniors now, Hannah Alonso is one of note, All-American several years, freshman of the year in her first year. And yeah, they really, when Hannah joined the team, we started to see some really cool extended hand-in-hand acro elements that weren't being competed in the sport, which is a really cool thing about the sport. Is as you get athletes with different skill sets, you can submit skills to be competed and valued and show up in the competitions. And so when Hannah came in, Azusa Pacific started doing some more of those extended hand-in-hands, and we've seen that evolve from there.
So here's Fairmont State, the 5-element heat.
So you saw a walk into extension with a 360 down. Here they're doing a toe pitch to that shoulder level. And she's going to do a layout off. And then you'll see a little portion of that compulsory acro segment. So into that inverted position, kind of a creative entry there, and down to the floor.
So that's Fairmont State in the 5-element acro heat. They had a start value of 9.80 compared to Azusa Pacific's 10 throughout the entire acro portion. And through the first 2 meets of the day, I mean, this is the second meet, this is the first time we're actually seeing a start value lower than 10 in the acro. Can you talk about the difference between having a higher start value and a lower start value?
Yeah, the start values are all based in difficulty. So the difficulty comes from the skills themselves, but also the combination of the skills. And you'll see often a lot of skills that are competed in a sequence, and the top never comes to the ground. So anytime you see the top go up and come back down, there's kind of a break in that sequence. That might change the difficulty. And then again, if you see inverted skills, if you see skills that are taking place at the shoulder level versus the base's arms fully extended, that's a different change in difficulty. So that's some of the things that can contribute to the difference in the start values. And it's really just about finding the right fit for your team. Some teams always want to maximize to that highest possible start value and take the risk of the execution deductions. Others are going to opt to make sure that they are executing cleanly. So they might have a lower start value, but they know they can go out and execute it really cleanly every time. So this is the fun part of the optional portion, is that the coaches get to decide based on the strengths of their athletes and their strategy for the meet.
Absolutely. In other words, a team could have a start value of 10, but they could have more deductions because the skills could be harder, and so they could be deducted maybe down to a 9.6, compared to a team that has a start value of a 9.8. They can execute to the best of their ability with the skills of a 9.8, and maybe get deducted just a little bit and be deducted to a 9.7, which is the advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's why you'll have teams have higher start values or lower start values, because they're just designing the skills that work best for their team. Yeah, and that was Fairmont State in the 5-element acro. Azusa Pacific awaiting their turn at the 5-element acro heat. Again, this should be really exciting to watch Azusa Pacific in the acro event just because of Hannah Alonso. We mentioned her already and how she's transformed the sport. But Azusa Pacific, historically, really fun acro team and trendsetters, and you're going to see a lot of really, really cool skills performed.
Yeah, we're going to see Hannah Alonso right here in this first heat with her partner, Jessica Gill. They've been partnering for 3 years together, which is kind of rare, but really cool. And Coach Willard talked about, you know, how that creates trust and kind of nonverbal communication. You know, with all the counterbalancing that takes place in acro, they've learned each other's body movements. They just kind of intuitively know what the other is doing because of their repetition together. So it's really fun to see what they can create and at the high level that they can execute. So we're going to see them out here, just the duo. There'll be a counter, but just the two of them are going to execute the entire 5-element sequence.
Yeah, that's quite the change than what we saw from Fairmont State, because Fairmont State sent 4 women out onto the mat. For Azusa Pacific, you're just seeing 2, Alonso and Gill. And
right.
So that's the difference between the 2.
Yeah, you can have anywhere from 2 to 4 athletes competing, you know, out there during these acro heats.
So here's Azusa Pacific coming out for the 5-element acro heat. Peyton Springer is going to be the counter.
So number 31 here is Hannah Alonso. We've referenced the base and the top, number 9, Jessica Gill. So they did a shoulder climb there, and then we're about to see extended hand-in-hand hold. So that inverted handstand. You can see Jessica, a little bit of her arm spent, kind of balancing there, and then the pike down. So when there is the press down from that inverted skill, the officials want to see a continuous movement. So the speed of that pike down should all remain the same. And then going into another climb and extended position and a straddle hold. So really solid work by the 2 of them. Again, it's nice to have replays so we can talk through some, you know, potential errors if there are. And so I think, you know, what we may see there, you see here, they start with the shoulder climb, so they just up right up there. And then the bases can reset their feet before they execute the next skill. And you see that extended hand-in-hand. So you can see Jessica Gill's arms are just a little bit bent, so that may be a potential deduction. And then as she comes through that, you know, she kind of comes through the end of that pike a little bit fast. So that's a potential continuity deduction. Then they do another climb up here. To that dangle position there, and then they go out to the straddle hold. Everything has to be held for 3 seconds. So then again, they'll evaluate the body position and the continuity of that flow, that skill down.
Yeah, those 3 seconds have to feel like an eternity.
I would imagine it does. I don't know if it's longer for the base or the top, but
I think it's long for both of them.
yeah, I think you're right.
Fairmont State about to come out onto the mat. It's going to be the 6-element acro heat.
Please welcome Catherine Cole, Alexis Smith, Priscilla Richmond, and Magdalene Gelati.
So we're going to see Fairmont State there, ascending skill. The entry into this will be a toe pitch again. So we want to see height on the toe pitch. Up, so you can see that the base releases the top and then catches her again at that shoulder level. And then she does a full twist off, a lay it out position full off, a little bit of a shaky landing. So there could be some deductions there from her body position on the landing. Another toe pitch up there with a second base to support. And then a laid out position there for the descending skill. And then we'll see another variation of that compulsory acro sequence that we saw. So 180 twist up, really nice continuous clean line up to the inverted position, held for 3 seconds, and there's their 6 elements.
And right there, Fairmont State, they had 4 athletes on the floor, and I think that's the difference that you have between the 4 athletes compared to the 2 athletes that we saw from Azusa Pacific. Midway through them completing the 6-element skills, they switch tops.
Right, yeah, and that's the advantage of having that variation in number. So if you have a top that's really strong in the inverted position, you might have a top that's really strong in, you know, those full offs to the ground. So, you know, it just kind of depends again on those strengths, and you can create the sequence based on the strength of your athletes.
Fairmont State competing right there. You can also see Alexis Smith, who has won the Mountain East Conference Athlete of the Year the last 2 years. She is a really, really crucial piece to this Fairmont State team, and we're going to see her throughout the entire meet.
Yeah, she's a fifth-year senior for Fairmont State. Just, you know, Coach Kutry talked about how coachable she is and how she makes adjustment and how she leads this team. And so, yeah, she's an NCATA All-American again this year, Mountain East Conference Player of the Year. So she's a big portion of this meet and a huge leader for Fairmont State.
Absolutely. Actually, Coach Kutry called her the most coachable student athlete. And so, you know,
that's a high compliment.
It is a high compliment. And especially with the history of Fairmont State that has been a pioneer in the sport of acrobatics and tumbling.
Absolutely. And Coach Kutry's mentor, Christy Kiefer, she's the head coach, the founding coach at Fairmont State, and she talked a lot about passing the torch to Danielle. Danielle talked about what that has meant to her and her support over the years, and so it's really cool to see, you know, Danielle competed at Fairmont State. She's coaching her alma mater and being able to transition and now having time with athletes like Alexis Smith over her 5-year career and being able to pass on the lessons she learned from Christy down to her athletes now, and hopefully some of those athletes are going to be going into coaching next year as well.
Yeah, it was really emotional for Coach Kutry, just being here without Coach Christy here, because she had never traveled before without Christy being with her, and so she was very emotional to be here without her coach and her mentor.
Yeah, she talked about just all the levels of support, you know, that she gets from her. And so, you know, yeah, making a trip without somebody that gives you that kind of love and support is always a challenge.
So here's Azusa Pacific 6-element acro heat.
Our top here, number 3, JC Van Silver, another NCATA All-American. So you saw that toe pitch up to the top at the shoulder level and then the tuck off. Then it's a shoulder climb back to the top. We're going to see an extended hand in hand. She's going to the top, have to hold that position again for 3 seconds. And then she's going to come down that pike position. Really, very, like, can you see how high her toes are? It's an incredibly hard position to hold. So again, wow, a really solid heat. Basically those 2 athletes working together to complete all 6 elements. So you can see the height there on the release on the toe pitch to that shoulder level. And the tuck off. And so you can see that they landed, you know, pretty much with their arms extended. If they were to land much further away, you know, maybe lose touch with the hands or to land really close, that would be a potential deduction. It was a smooth landing there. And then going into that high hand-in-hand position, there's always going to be a little bit of counterbalancing, like a little bit of tiny movements that these athletes are doing to make sure that that stays in the air. It's very rare that you're going to see 0 movement whatsoever. And then again, we talked about those press downs. We see a lot of those throughout, you know, on different teams, and you want to make sure that those presses, that there's continuous movement, and the pace of that is the same throughout the skill.
So here's Fairmont State, the 7-element acro heat, 9.90 start value for the Falcons.
So we're going to see them start with a toe pitch again. We saw a couple steps from the base there. A layout off. Another toe pitch. Solid there. And a full off. So she added that 360 degrees of twist to that layout off. Then up to shoulder level. Straddle position. Again, straddle should be at 90 degrees. There'll be that pop over that we saw in compulsory event. Then the release from that second base. They want to see stability with the base. And then the dismount down to the ground.
That was Peyton Barnes, the base for the Falcons right there. And right before the final skill, just a little bit of a face and smile to her teammates.
Yeah, I think, you know, she knew that they were wrapping up the heat and that they had gotten that final skill really solid and gave her Gave her teammates a little laugh. So you saw in that very first portion of the sequence that on that first toe pitch that Peyton had to take a couple steps. So those will be deductions there. But pretty small steps. So again, incrementally, it won't be a huge deduction, but that will be a deduction that they'll see.
And there's the face right there.
There it is.
So that was the Fairmont State Falcons completing the 7-element acro heat. That is the final heat in the acro event. Azusa Pacific, they're waiting their turn. Again, Azusa Pacific, start values of 10 across the board in the acro event for Fairmont State. They didn't have 10 start values at all throughout the entire acro event. 9.80 in the 5-element, 9.85 in the 6-element, and then a 9.90 in the 7-element. Still, though, a little bit of progression, which is exactly what we see here in acrobatics and tumbling.
Right, and the progression of the requirements throughout that. So with the 5-element going up to that 7-element, there are certain, the skills are valued at certain levels that they're marked by letters, so A, B, C, D, E, and the E skills, those are the hardest skills. So the requirements build up through that, so you can see the start values build up there.
And here again, we're going to see Jessica Gill working with Hannah Alonso.
Yeah, these partners, we'll see them again. So they're going to start with what's called a walk-in. So instead of the toe pitch, they stayed connected the whole time. So there was no release on the entry. So that's the walk-in. So you'll see them do that extended high hand-in-hand again. Down to the pike. So similar to what they started with the 5-element. And similar there again, they're going into the straddle hold. And so from the straddle hold there in the acro 5, they dismounted. So now they're going to that popover and release there, and they want to see that stability. No movement there. Down to the floor. So
that's Azusa Pacific wrapping up the 7-element acro heat. And with Alonso and Gill working together, they've produced a couple of perfect 10s in the acro 5, and they've had 3 scores of 9.90 or higher in the acro 7. These athletes are doing it at the best of their abilities, and with start values of 10, they're also able to execute and get start values of 10. They, like we said, they're an incredible duo, incredible pair. They execute every meet at a really high level. And so for them, I'm sure we've talked a little bit about the mental aspect. It's just going out there and making sure they're relaxed, and that Coach Kara talked about letting the skills do the work. So going out there with that muscle memory, trusting each other, making those little adjustments as they go to have the highest level of execution each meet. Jessica Gill was named the NCATA Division II Athlete of the Year. That wraps up the acro event, so we're going to step aside and take a break, but when we come back, we're going to announce the scores for the acro event and introduce the pyramid event to wrap up the first half here at the NCATA National Championships. Just wrapped up the acro event. We got the scores for the compulsory event, and now we have the scores for the acro event. So in the acro 5-element, Azusa Pacific 9.725, Fairmont State 9.100. In the acro 6, Azusa Pacific 9.725, Fairmont State 9.050, and then in the 7-element, Azusa Pacific 9.775, Fairmont State 9.050. Wrapped up the total for the acro event. Azusa Pacific 29.225, Fairmont State 27.200. Overall in the meet, Azusa Pacific 67.000, Fairmont State 63.925. Fairmont State is the 7 seed, and they're trailing to Azusa Pacific 67 to 63.925. They're currently fixing the mat here at Matthew Knight Arena. Not really sure what was wrong with the mat, but they're retaping it, making sure that the mat is as flat as possible. But that's what they're currently doing right now, and I think this is the right move, because if this can be more safe for the athletes, then that's the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. With all the activity on the mat, sometimes they can get shifted, and it's just a little bit of realignment to making sure, like you said, that they're as flat as possible, and that the Velcro straps that hold all the panels together are doing well. So the team did great work there at the break to make sure that the mats are as safe as possible for the athletes.
So let's talk about these scores in the acro event. Fairmont State scoring significantly lower than Azusa Pacific, but they also had start values lower than Azusa Pacific, and Azusa is just historically known as a great acro team. What is your overall thoughts on these scores so far through the first two events?
Yeah, Fairmont really basically performed at the level that they were expecting. They've done, they raised some start values throughout the season to get some extra start value there, and so they did a good job of sticking with the average that they've scored over the season. Azusa scored a little bit lower, which is just, sometimes it's just the challenge of having that 5-panel championship officiating where you've got more eyes on the mat, able to see some of those little minor mistakes. So they scored a little bit lower than the season average, but again, like you noted, overall a really strong strong event and a solid event win over Fairmont State.
So they're announcing the scores currently at Math United Arena. Again, we're going to have one more event in the first half, and that's going to be the pyramid event. So let's go ahead and introduce you to the pyramid event.
The pyramid event is coming up.
In this event, you will see pyramids that are 3 levels high.
This event has 3 different heats with different requirements for each.
Heat 1 must have an inversion, Heat 2 must be synchronized, and Heat 3 is the open heat.
The start value of each heat is determined by the difficulty and combination of the structure, entry, dismount, and top body position.
Some of the things the officials will be looking for are the positions of the tops and sturdiness of the structure.
So those are the rules for the pyramid event. Fairmont State coming out onto the floor, and they're going to open things off with the inversion pyramid heat.
So as the title suggests, you're going to see one of the athletes in an inverted position in this pyramid. Pyramid is basically building on that acro event that we saw and those acrobatic elements to create a third level. So a lot of times we're seeing athletes really high up in the air and hold, we have the primary bases there on the ground, that mid-level base, number 10, and then Alexis Smith as the top on this pyramid. And you can see they're holding that inverted position at the shoulder level. So that accounts, again, the level at which the bases are holding the top, the entry, and the dismount all contribute to the overall difficulty of the pyramid. But a great start for Fairmont State there. We saw a little bit as, the entry was very smooth as they get up here to go into that position, the inverted position. You can see a little bit of movement there. So there's going to be some stability deductions potentially. The top had to kind of press and extend her arms a little bit. You can see here in the catch from this beautiful angle we have, she landed a little, she wasn't fully rotated in that, so she landed a little bit to the side. So there'll be some small deductions in this heat for them. But, the body position was nice in the landing. She just was a little bit rotated there to the side in the catch.
And with that twist, you got to think it's really hard to land flat and straight.
Yeah, the timing of it is everything, right? So we've talked a lot about timing, and so as she comes down, she's descending in the air as she's trying to complete that twist. So really the air awareness and all of that plays in there as she's coming into the catch.
So that was Fairmont State in the inversion heat of the pyramid event. They have a start value of 10.0 in the inversion and synchronized heat. And then in the open, they have a 9.90 start value. Compare that to Azusa, 10s across the board. And normally you see a lot of 10s across the boards with the higher teams in the first half. But with Fairmont State, we've seen in the first half, they're not afraid to lower the start values.
Yeah, and that just comes down to execution like we talked about and making choices that are good for your team. They started at shoulder level with that pyramid, but they had the harder descending scale or the dismount. So, that's where the coaches get to decide. So here we see a little bit of a version of that compulsory pyramid. 2 primary bases, a mid base. There's a second mid base supporting behind. But there you have the combo of Hannah Alonso and Jessica Gill again, going to that extended hand in hand, in the handstand position, down to the pike down, press down, and then the dismount was, the difficulty was mostly in that everything that was happening up at that extended position. So the entry and the dismount weren't particularly difficult, but they had all of their difficulty up there in the structure and in the tops body position and the modifiers that she did up there at the top.
Here again, as we look at the replay, and we see Hannah Alonso, that middle base, working with Jessica Gill, the tandem that's been doing it for the last 3 years.
The bread and butter, so to speak. They have the skills that they do, and they do them really well, so they continue to incorporate them as they can throughout the meet in different events.
Yeah, Hannah Alonso, 3-time NCATA All-American 2019, 2021, and 2022. 2020, there wasn't a season.
Wasn't an option. She'd probably be a 4-time if we had 2020 mixed in there, but as we all did, and as a spring sport, the season was canceled, and there wasn't an opportunity to really have enough meets up to that point in the season, nor a championship event to be able to make those awards. But certainly a very talented young lady, and all of the awards and accolades speak for themselves.
Now here is Fairmont State, and everybody's on the mat.
Everybody on the floor. I think this is the first time I've seen that. So 2 groups for the synchronized heat. And that means there's 14 athletes in each of these groups out there on the floor. It looks like we do maybe even have a counter. So you can see the thigh stand position of those primary bases. And they are going to toss these tops all the way up to that shoulder level. Then they're pressing up to the extended. So as you can imagine, once you get them to that shoulder level, being able to press that overhead strength that it takes. And then you'll see a 180 twist down to the catch, the cradle. So a cool opportunity for the whole gang to get involved and execute those skills.
I don't think I've ever seen that before. The entire team come on the mat, and it's not the team event.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of the cool part about Pyramid is because of all the different structures, you can have just 3 people out there, or you can have, a really large groups, and especially for synchronized pyramid where you're executing 2 pyramids at the same time, it can account for a lot of participation from the student athletes.
Now, Fairmont State, they have a little bit smaller of a roster compared to other programs like Azusa Pacific and like the Baylors. What does it mean for a program like Fairmont State to really utilize everybody on their team, whereas a team like Azusa Pacific, they have a bigger, deeper bench?
Yeah, it's really just up to the institution and the program, in terms of the size of the roster that they want to maintain. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. But yeah, there's 28 athletes on the game day roster. So if you carry a larger roster, that just means you have a lot more options for substitutions. You may have more specialists. And then if you have a roster around 28 or 30, then you're definitely using all of those kids, to their full potential. Or I should say in the full complement of the meet. All of these athletes are performing to their full potential.
Azusa Pacific now coming out. This is the synchronized pyramid heat.
So we're going to see first time today a back bend for the primary base, the back bend position. And the mid base is standing on their thighs. And this is what I was talking about where we saw a whole group of people before. Now we just see 3 people executing a pyramid. So in that extended position with those straddles and the 360 twist down. So really strong heat for Azusa Pacific.
What is the advantage a team has using the back bridge base compared to another team that uses everybody?
Yeah, again, it's just a matter of preference, and a lot of it has to do with the skills that you want to do at the top. So it depends on, the strength of those bases. The back bend provides just, kind of a flat space to be able to do. If you can imagine having, if that primary base is standing and you wanted to have the mid base extended, that would be really high in the air. That would be challenging. So it allows to have kind of a lower base level there, and just use the mobility and the flexibility of those athletes to incorporate them into the skills.
Yeah, that back base was actually created by Fee Mulkey during her first year at Baylor when she went to Baylor for the first time. They had a student athlete there that was able to implement that, and then next thing you know, everybody's doing it. It felt like in acrobatics and tumbling.
And that's the cool cool part of the sport. And we talked a little bit about it with Hannah Alonso's entry into the sport. And as you mentioned, the backbend basing that Baylor brought to the sport, and that's the creativity and the excitement about this. We have athletes that are coming from so many disciplines. We have competitive cheerleading, we have acrobatic gymnastics, we have artistic gymnasts, we have power tumblers.
We have weightlifters.
Yeah, we have weightlifters, we have divers. We have people that are doing pole vault and they have that air awareness, and then they find the sport and they come in and compete. And so when you have that range of skill and ability, it's really fun to see how you can use that to be really creative and tailor the sport to the strengths of your athletes.
Here's Fairmont State. They're going to have a 9.90 start value here in the open pyramid heat.
So we're going to see the back bend again. I mean, I have a hard time standing up on my own 2 feet. I can't imagine standing on someone's thighs, but it's incredibly impressive, and you can see how the mid base uses, bends her legs a little bit, and she's balancing. They're all balancing throughout that with their, her lower body, and she's able to keep her upper body stable and keep the top stable at the top. So again, I marvel because I have a hard time walking and chewing gum. So.
Yeah, I feel that. And, you can't even imagine the weight it takes to hold 2 human beings on your thighs. That's got to be hard for the base as well.
I'm sure it is. Well, and the strength and conditioning that these athletes do, that's sport specific, using Olympic weightlifting, it prepares them for this. If you think about those Olympic movements, if you think about, a clean and what you're doing when you lift another person and toss them in the air, all those things translate. So they really focus in on building strength through the fall as they're working on those compulsory skills and those skill progressions, but really focus on building strength so that as they come to this part of the season, they're all prepared and they can go into that muscle memory mode. They're going to continue training throughout the season as well. But it's been really fun to see as the sport has evolved and the skill difficulty has increased. A big part of that has been the increase in the strength and conditioning of the programs and the overall strength of the student athletes.
Yeah, we like to say a lot that these women are by far the strongest athletes pound for pound on this camp.
Pound. Oh, absolutely.
Azusa Pacific now coming out. Open pyramid. They're going to have a start value of 10.
So we're going to see a little bit of a version of the compulsory pyramid and some of those combinations for the structure. So you see a thigh stand, a 270 up there, and they're going to do their inverted position here at the shoulder level. And then JC does a 360 twist off to the cradle.
So that was Azusa Pacific in the open pyramid. Let's go ahead and look at the replay one more time.
Something crucial in the dismount for this pyramid is that it's a release. So in the dismounts for pyramids, you can either maintain contact, which they call full contact, or you can release. So you want to say that there's a clear break between the base and the top, so you can see how they release as JC's doing that 360 down into the cradle.
So with that wraps up the first half of this acrobatics and tumbling meet. Again, number 2, Azusa Pacific, 5-1 overall in the year. Number 7, Fairmont State, they're 9-1 overall. We're going to step aside and take a break, but when we come back, we're going to announce the pyramid scores, and then we'll have halftime interviews here at the NCATA National Championships. Welcome back inside to Matthew Knight Arena. Let's get you the scores for the pyramid event. In heat number 1, Azusa Pacific 9.825, Fairmont State 9.575. In heat number 2, Azusa Pacific 9.725, Fairmont State 9.700. And then in the open pyramid heat, 9.850 to 9.525 for Fairmont State. Azusa Pacific overall 29.400. Fairmont State 28.800. That brings us to a total score. Azusa Pacific 96.400. Fairmont State 92.725. And we'd now like to welcome you Matt Side here at Matthew Knight Arena, Matt Uretsky, and Janelle Cook joined alongside Coach Kara Willard. And Coach, in the first half, what have you thought about your squad?
I thought our team is doing great first half. We've been working a lot on it, and I feel really pleased. I don't think they could have done any better in their acro heats and pyramid heats. So I'm happy with their performance so far.
We saw a lot of Hannah Alonzo and Jessica Gill in that first half. Can you just talk about those two student athletes?
Yeah, the two of them have been solid since the moment they started our program, and they are going on 3 years of being partners in their acros and pyramids. So it's a special bond and relationship, and we'll be really sad to see the two of them graduate.
So you talked a little bit yesterday about the excitement of TOS event and how it really kickstarts, off and running into the second half. So talk a little bit about the second half, what you want to see in TOS all the way through team.
Yeah, we talk a lot about energy in the second half, bringing the big energy is what we call it, and JC starting off our toss heats with her kick double really brings momentum into our second half. So we're excited to see that, and then also some new group passes coming up, and finish it off with the team event. So.
Awesome. We talked a little bit earlier in the day about just the evolution of the sport and how it's grown, and the Azusa Pacific, Fairmont State as founding members of the NCATA and reaching a really important milestone. So share a little bit about your thoughts about that important milestone that's been reached.
Yeah, for me, I started as a student athlete, and the last time that we had championships here was my junior year in college. So it's amazing to see how much it's changed since then, and to hit that 40 mark just means the world to me and all of the alumni and people that have built this program before us. So we're thrilled to be back here and ready for us to get the championship status.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here. Good luck in the second half, and enjoy the national championships.
Thank you.
So let's look at the scores one more time. So at the halftime break, Azusa Pacific currently leading 96.400, Fairmont State 92.725. That's going to do it for us here in the first half. We're going to step aside and take a break for halftime. When we come back, we're going to have another coach interview with Fairmont State, and then we'll have the second half, the triple T's, the toss, the tumble, and the team. Welcome back here inside the Matthew Knight Arena. Azusa Pacific currently leading Fairmont State 96.400 to Fairmont State's 92.725. And at this time, we're going to bring it back to Matt's side and bring in Coach Danielle Coutry. Coach, first half, what are your thoughts about your team's performance?
I'm really proud of them. We had a little bit shaky in our compulsories and acros, but we really showed up in our pyramids. And hopefully we are a second half team, so we continue to show up.
Coach, it's your first time here without Christy. What does it mean to be here without your mentor by your side?
I've talked to her every single day. I miss her a lot, but she's prepared me for this. And I know that she's here rooting us on. I know she's sending me text messages. You guys look great. Keep up. Keep doing what you're doing. I miss her a lot, though, but I know she's here in spirit.
Awesome.
All right, you mentioned your second half team, so talk a little bit about what you're expecting from your team in the second half and what's really going to give you guys momentum going into the final event.
So second half, we always start out with our tosses pretty strong. We upgraded our sink tosses to fulls, and we are hopeful that that sets the bar. And then our tumbling, we've really have shown to have good scores in tumbling, so I'm hopeful that that continues. Today, we had a great warm-up, so we're ready.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck in the second half.
Thank
and
you.
We're going to step aside and take a break here at the NCATA National Championships. Don't go anywhere. We got the second
Awesome.
half,
Good
the
job.
toss, the tumble. Through the first half here at Matthew Knight Arena, the 7-seeded Fairmont State Falcons taking on the 2-seeded Azusa Pacific Cougars. And let's walk you guys through the scores so far. In the compulsory event, Azusa Pacific 37.775, Fairmont State 36.725. That gave the Cougars a little bit of advantage to start, and they've just kept rolling with it. In the acro, Azusa Pacific 29.225. Fairmont State 27.200 in the pyramid event. Azusa Pacific 29.400. Fairmont State 28.800. We're at halftime. Your thoughts on the overall first half scores, Janelle?
Yeah, I think both teams are, on pace with what we expected through the first half. And, there is a variance in the start values for these teams. And so they, it's all about execution for both teams here on out. For Fairmont, they've got to do their very best and see maybe that there's some mistakes on Azusa's side. Azusa needs to just stay in that driver's seat, make sure they execute to the best of their ability, minimize errors, and hopefully, finish out the meet strong.
96.40 to 92.725. It's not quite 4-whole point lead for Azusa Pacific, but nonetheless, still a pretty large margin if you're thinking about it. So we're through the first half, the compulsory, the acro, and the pyramid. Let's go ahead and introduce you guys to the first event in the second half, and that is the toss event.
Next up is the toss event.
Here you will see a group of athletes toss another athlete into the air. The top will perform a flip and or twist in the air before being caught. There are 3 heats in this event. Heat 1 is the salto toss. Heat 2 is the duo toss, in which 2 groups will need to throw synchronized identical skills, and the final heat is the open toss heat. The start value of the toss depends on the skill that the top executes in the air. The official will be looking for the height of the toss, the top's body position, and tight catches from the bases.
So those are the rules for the toss event. Fairmont State, they're going to come out onto the floor first. They're going to have a start value of 9.40 in the 450 salto heat.
So we're going to see them executing a back layout 360, otherwise known as a full. So you'll see the top load in here to the toss. And again, as we talked about in compulsory toss, we want to see extension from the tossing group up and having that skill executed at the top of the height, of the skill. The top needs to be extended through that before they start to execute that full skill at the top. And you want to see them extended coming back into the catch. So as we look at this replay, you'll see as number 4, let me get her name.
Sophia Del Greco.
Thank you, Sophia Del Greco. She goes and extends into that, executes that full twist, but you can see that she doesn't get fully extended as she comes back into the cradle. So again, we have the awesome benefit of replay, but you can see that she didn't get full extension, her body was still piked, and then she landed and caught in that cradle in a little bit of a piked position. So there'll be some deductions there, but overall, a great start to the toss heat.
And if you're just joining us and you're wondering how is acrobatics and tumbling scored, it's actually scored live by officials. In the NCATA National Championship, there's 5 officials compared to the regular season where there are 3 officials. And again, they're scoring it live. They don't have the benefit to replay. They don't have the benefit to slow motion. They're just looking at it, they're scoring it, and at the very end of the event, they're going to tally up the scores and add them together.
Right, we have 2 officials on the championships panel that are watching the tops. 2 officials that are watching the base for execution. The head official watches for neutral penalties, so making sure that the requirements of the heat are fulfilled, that the teams are competing what they've stated prior to the meet. So yeah, the technical pieces are incremental, so they're based on the severity of the error.
Azusa Pacific now out, 10.0 start value in the 450 salto heat.
So this is JC Van de Zilver, All-American. Coach Willard said at halftime, this is gets them rolling in the second heat. She starts with a 10.0 start value, a kickback double. You can see the reaction there. That's going to be a great start for their second half as they planned, as they strategized. So you can see the split happens on the front, the full 2 twists in the laid out position back into the cradle.
And we were talking about it. A team feels really good when they're running off the mat screaming, that excited. And normally when they run off the mat and they're feeling that good about themselves, they score pretty high.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see in that replay, especially straight on, that laid out body position that she maintains. And the height of the skill, and so all of that factors into the ultimate score that they'll receive for the heat.
Fairmont State now going to come out. It's going to be the synchronized toss. a start value of 9.40, similar to the 450 Salto Heat star value we saw from the Falcons.
Yeah, we'll be seeing the same skill. We're just going to see it synchronized with 2 groups. So it'll be that back layout 360 or a full twist in a laid out position. So a full flip and a full twist into the catch. So great start there. You can see the synchronization was on. So the officials are really going to be looking at those minute details of those things we talked about, the extension from the top, the body position of the top, how they've extended coming into the catch, and then how the catch is executed. The body position of the catch counts if the bases need to move from side to side. All of those things you can see there in the group on the right. The feet are a little bit high up in the air, a little higher than the head, so that's a potential deduction. But overall, strong synchronized heat for Fairmont State.
And again, the synchronized portion of the toss event is, in my opinion, the hardest hardest heat in the toss event, just because you have to synchronize the bases, the tops at the same time, and those tops, they don't weigh the same. They don't have the same height. There's so many factors that go into it, the strength that you're throwing up these student athletes, and there's so many different areas that could go wrong that you see a lot of deductions happen in the synchronized toss.
Certainly you do, and it's really cool to see the progression of those skills. They make sure that as they go through the season, they're progressing to that. They watch a lot of video to see, that different heights potentially, the timing of the skills. So yeah, it's a lot about getting on the same page together and continuing those repetitions until they get to a place where they have that muscle memory and are able to come out and execute the same way each time.
Here's Azusa Pacific, a 9.90 start value for the Cougars.
So we're going to see a double here. So that's 2 twists in the laid out position. So removing that kick, you see JC Van de Zilver over there on the left. And the top on the right is number 25.
That's Janai Jenkins. Excuse me, not Janai Jenkins. That's April Nava.
April Nava, thank you. And so that was a great heat. So you can see, again, the synchronization is great. You can see a little bit, again, on the replay, the body position, the full extension coming into the cradle. So there's some potential deductions there. A little bit, when we slow it down, you can see a little bit of a minor synchronization as they come into the catch there. So a little bit of movement in the group on the right there. So that's a potential deduction.
So we're through the first 2 heats in the toss event. Coming up is going to be the open heat in the toss event, and this is the portion of the toss event where teams have a little bit more flexibility in what they're going to do. Fairmont State, they're going to have a start value of 9.25, which is actually lower than their start value they had in the 450 and synchronized heats, which is a little bit interesting. They decide to go a little bit down instead of the progression that we see where teams normally up the start values.
Right, you're right. Well, the first 2 have really specific requirements for the heat. And so they're trying to find the right fit within the tosses that meet those requirements for their team. In the open, again, you're looking at the skills of your team and what your strengths are. And so this is an area where, lower start value might be a better fit for the skill and the capacity of the team in order to get the highest execution score. So this will be a front flip layout 360. So you're going to see, first time we're going to see the athletes go to the front instead of to the flipping to the back.
So that was Fairmont State in the open toss heat. Let's go ahead and look at the replay one more time as you're going to see the top. It's Alexis Smith, the 5th-year senior top.
Yeah, and as you go into those front skills in the toss, it's a little bit harder to achieve that height because of the difference of the way that the skills are executed. So there's the potential there for some lack of height. But overall, Alexis kept a great body position through that. It was a pretty nice catch, and so should be a good execution score overall, even though it is a lower start value.
Alexis Smith, who we talked about earlier being the, quote, most coachable student athlete on this Fairmont State team, she only competed as a tumbler as a freshman. Now she competes in all 6 events, and I think that just shows how in this sport, as a freshman, it's really hard to make an impact. and two, the progression that you can have in your career that by the time you're a senior, you're going to be competing potentially in all 6 events.
Yeah, definitely. The technicality of all the skills is something that you can't just jump in and do some reps and pick it up and run. So, it's really something that you may be incredibly athletic or have a specific skill set, but as you train more and more, and especially as you learn, most teams have all of their student athletes working those compulsory skills because those are the building blocks and they can progress in different areas. So as you start to hone in on those compulsory skills, coaches are starting to see, what your strengths are, how they can place you in other events and utilize your strengths as an athlete or your strengths physically, if you're a strong base. And tumbling comes with all that shaping and body position, so it's really applicable throughout the whole meet to a lot of different events and heats.
So here's Azusa Pacific, the open toss.
So that's going to be the double. So a back layout, 720. So 2 twists and a flip in the air. And a little bit problematic, not quite the same execution that we saw during the sink heat. So we'll look at the replay here. As we get up there, you can see that the catch, she's coming through right there at the end, and so her shoulders and head are low. So that's going to be a deduction there on extension through the landing. You can see, again, with the benefit of replay, feet coming apart during the skill. So those will be some minor deductions that will be taken for this heat.
So that'll wrap up the toss event. Again, Azusa Pacific right there, a 9.90 start value in the open heat. That'll do it for the toss event, so we're going to step aside and take a break, but don't stumble. We got the tumble coming up here at the NCATA National Championships. Just wrapped up the toss event, which is the first event in the second half, and let's go ahead and look at the scores. So, in the 450 salto heat, Azusa Pacific, a 9.875, which was that good start that we saw from the Cougars. Fairmont State, 8.875 in the 450 salto heat. In the synchronized toss, Azusa Pacific, 9.350, Fairmont State, 8.750. In the open toss, Azusa Pacific 9.300, Fairmont State 8.575, excuse me. Azusa Pacific total 28.525, Fairmont State 26.200 overall in the meet so far. Azusa Pacific keeps on growing their lead, 124.925, Fairmont State 118.925. So we just wrapped up the toss event. Now it's time for the tumbling event.
This is the tumbling event.
This event has 6 heats. The start value of each heat is determined by the difficulty and combination of skills in each pass. The first 3 heats are synchronized, a duo, a trio, and a quad tumbling pass, in which all athletes in the group must execute the same tumbling pass from start to finish. The last 3 heats are individual tumbling passes with different requirements in each. The officials will be looking for form, execution, and proper technique of each skill.
So those are the rules for the tumbling event, and in the tumbling event, this is where you see the greatest disparity in the start values. We're going to see Fairmont State begin with a duo pass of 8.95. We're going to see Avery Keller and Emily Brock for the Falcons.
They're going to be coming after from the back corner. They're going to start with a front handspring, go to a front tuck, round off back handspring, and a layout 360 or a full. So again, a slightly lower start value, but really, hey, nice. So the tandem worm, the duo worm. Oh no, that's not the worm. I don't know what you call that. Anyway, the shoulder shrug together. So yeah, so the duo pass is a lot. These first 3 heats are all about synchronization and finding that combination of skills that allows those athletes to perform the skills at the same time and at a high level of execution. And so starting off there with a lower start value pays off. It was a really beautiful pass. They remained synchronized through the whole pass. So I'm sure there'll be some minor deductions on, there we go. What do you call that?
I don't know what you call that.
Fun. We'll just call it fun. So we'll see, some deductions on overall execution, but a really strong start for them and an example of maximizing execution even with a lower start value.
So we saw Fairmont State. They were running diagonally, and you can do that in the tumbling event. We're about to get set for Azusa Pacific, and Azusa Pacific, it looks like they're going to go across the middle of the mat, and that's the difference that you have as a coach. You can decide to use your tumblers to go diagonally across the mat, or you could go through the center of the mat. It's just whatever is better for your team and the skills that you're looking to perform. But Azusa, it looks like they're going to opt to go through the middle of the mat. For Azusa in the duo tumbling, we're going to see JC Vandezilver and Sarah Long. JC Vandezilver, she is the All-American, one of 3 All-Americans on this APU team. Azusa, they're going to have a start value of 10.0 in the duo pass. They're looking to get all the points here.
Coach Willard talked about during that time they had to prepare for the championship. They really played around with different combinations in these synchronized heats in order to find the right duo that was going to pull together the best overall. So you can see some of that work really paid off. You saw that duo do a round off 1.5, which is a hard transition into a round off backhand spring whip and another full at the end. Incredible synchronization. They had good continuity out of that first 1.5. So a lot of it I'm gonna leave that one to the judges.
Yeah, that one looked pretty good. And again, these athletes are supposed to finish their skills on the mat. If they step off the mat with 1 foot, then that's a deduction. And if they step off the mat with both feet, then that's an even bigger deduction.
Right, so they're allowed to declare if they're going to take a step. So the step needs to be controlled, which you saw those athletes do right there. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, if they land near the edge of the mat with both feet and they step off, then that's a 1/10 deduction. If they land off the mat in the skill, then it's a 5/10 deduction. So it's a much bigger penalty. So you'll see, some of these, they're using the entire mat to fit that pass in. So you'll see them, they have awareness of where they are on the mat. They'll make adjustments in the air to make sure that they are landing on the mat.
We're now going to move to the trio pass. A 9.40 start value for Fairmont State in the trio. So we're going to see Sophia Del Grego, Catherine Cole, and Alexis Smith coming up for the Falcons.
So we're going to see a round off whip, 2 backhand springs into a 1.5. Really nice job. You can see a little bit on those landings. That's an example where the step wasn't controlled. There at the athlete tumbling at the top of the mat there. We'll see it again, but the synchronization they maintain through the whole skill, really good execution throughout. So again, example, they know that they can do this pass really well. They're going to do it to their best ability and minimize any potential deduction. So as we talk about controlled steps, watch here number 5 at the top. And as she comes through that skill, just you can see how she bounds forward. So that's going to be a deduction versus like landing, not having to take the step, but stepping forward.
You can see assistant coach Haley Cochran for Fairmont State. She was pretty pleased with her team's effort right there. Slap it on the floor, smiling, and went back with the team. I'm sure they're feeling pretty good after that trio pass. Fairmont State, a 9.40 in the trio pass compared to an 8.95 in the duo pass. You don't normally see that. You normally see as you add more athletes, then the start values go down a little bit. Fairmont State, it's just not the case. They decided to up the start value as they added more athletes.
We're seeing that, with different teams, and it's really just about, like we were saying, finding those right combinations of the athletes, and certain athletes can do certain skills really well, and so that plays into just finding the right combinations and making sure you're putting them together to be successful.
So that's Azusa Pacific in the trio pass. They had a start value of 9.40, which was exactly the same as Fairmont State. And again,
actually, a rare time we see the same skills happening. So they also did a round off whip with 2 backhand springs and the 540. So this will be kind of a head-to-head matchup. You can see a little bit on the replay, a little bit of differentiation in the synchronization. And again, let's see here as they progress through, you can see just a little bit off here as they get down through those. You can see legs come apart a little bit. And the steps, I'll leave that to the officials this time, but a couple minor errors there, so that's going to be a fun head-to-head matchup in scores where usually we're talking about different skills and it's not quite the same in this optional portion of the event.
I think that's really exciting, especially because this is Fairmont State, who is a 7 seed going against Azusa Pacific, who's the 2 seed, and obviously Azusa Pacific has had higher start values throughout, but for the trio pass, they both have executing the exact same skills and have the exact same start value. It's like the compulsory event, but we're back here in the tumbling event.
That's right.
Be interesting to see how the trio pass is scored. Looking forward to that one. Fairmont State going to come out for the quad pass now, and this will be 4 student athletes coming out. Elizabeth Marr, Natalie Moore, Riley Vinson, and Hannah Sadler for the Falcons.
So as you mentioned, lower start value here. They're doing a round off backhand spring 1.5. So 3 elements put together. It's all about that synchronization, timing, and the execution.
So that was Fairmont State in the quad pass. Let's go ahead and look at the replay one more time.
So overall, great synchronization. You just see as they come out of that 1.5, just a little bit of differentiation. So you can see the second tumbler in has a little bit of trouble on her landing in a rotation through that 1.5. So she's going to have, you can see that her knees got a deep squat there as she landed and took a step. But overall, you know, again, solid heat.
So that was a quad pass for the Fairmont State Falcons. Azusa Pacific in the quad pass, they're going to have a 9.55 start value, so 0.45 higher than Fairmont State. Again, tumbling, this is where you see the greatest disparity in the start values. This is where teams can really come from behind if they're behind, or really add on to the lead if they're ahead due to the difference in the start values. And there's just so many room for error in the tumbling event that this is often the event with the most amount of deductions.
Yeah, it's definitely. It's because of the elements and because of the high technical nature of it, we do see a lot of deductions.
Here's Azusa Pacific in the quad pass. Lily Richardson, Peyton Springer, April Nava, and Jessica Gill in the quad pass.
So we're going to see a round off 1.5, so 540 degrees of twist in that laid out position, into a round off backhand spring full.
So that was Azusa Pacific in the quad pass.
So Coach Willard talked to us yesterday and said, you know, that they had played around with different combinations and that they were really feeling like the group passes were a strength. And I think this heat just got a little bit off, so you could start to see that timing and consistency break down through the 1.5, and they were all kind of hitting different marks here through the 360. So synchronization will be key here, and then you'll see some of the continuity breaks there, and you know, some, again with replay, some legs apart, a little bit of a misstep on the landing there. So those will be some deductions that they're going to receive here in the quad heat.
So that wraps up the team portion of the tumbling event. Again, the first 3 heats, there's the duo pass, the trio pass, and the quad pass, 2, 3, and 4 student athletes. For the final 3 heats of the tumbling event, there is the 6 element, the aerial, and the open pass. The aerial is going to be the first pass we're going to see, and they're all going to just be 1 student athlete. And these student athletes that do the solo tumbling are normally the best of the best tumblers on these squads. This is really exciting. At least to me, I've talked about how I think that the solo tumbling is by far the most entertaining or the most exciting, in my opinion. You, on the other hand, you think that the team portion of the tumbling is more exciting.
I do. I really like the synchronized nature of it, and even though we're going to see some more elite skills here from these solo tumblers, I really enjoy the synchronization piece because we've talked about how difficult it is, especially when you're twisting and when you're trying to connect, you know, basically 2 passes together in one pass across the mat. There's a lot of room for error, and so when those can be done really well, I just think it's so exciting. But I'm really excited to see the solo tumblers.
We're going to see Zara Kristoff now for the Fairmont State Falcons. This is the aerial pass in the tumbling event.
Gonna do a front tuck, round off. So she did a front tuck, round off, back handspring 1.5. And a start value of 9.55. So overall good execution. You can see she landed there and with 2 feet had to step back. So that'll be an execution deduction for her there on the landing. Looked like there was good continuity through the front tuck here. She had good height into the round off, back handspring, and the 540. But you can see her legs just got a little bit mixed up there on the landing. So as she came into that landing, she had under rotated a little bit. But overall, it'll be a good heat.
A little bit of a stumble, nonetheless, an excellent aerial pass for the Fairmont State Falcons and Zara Kristoff. For Azusa Pacific, they're going to have 10.0 start values throughout the solo portion of the tumbling event. They have 100% confidence in all of their women to execute to the best of their abilities and really hammer all those skills that are required for the 10.0. And again, this is a moment where Azusa Pacific is up by a significant margin, 124.925 to 118.925 by Fairmont State. And in the tumbling event, they could really, really add on to that lead.
Yeah, it's all about execution, and they do have those start values that can really give them a big cushion going into the team event where we know anything can happen. But this is an area where they've got a significant start value, and they can really just add to that lead. And, you know, I'm sure also they're focused on today. But it's, you know, it is a 3-day tournament, and they want to advance, so they'll be thinking about how they can come out and just have a really great performance to set the table for hopefully if they're going to advance, that they can build on that throughout the tournament. They've been averaging really high scores through these heats, you know, starting with a 10 start value over the season, averaging a 9.775 or higher. And so, you know, there's been some different combinations, different people competing in those heats throughout the season, and they've selected kind of these top soloists to bring it home and finish off the night. In tumbling, I should say.
Still awaiting Azusa Pacific in the aerial pass. They're going to send out JC Van de Zilver, the senior, the All-American. She has competed in all the different disciplines this season. She's averaging a 9.8 in both the pyramid and toss events this season. JC Van de Zilver, an All-American, 2-time All-American actually. She's really impressive. And this open tumbling event, this is where, in my opinion, you really get to see the skills of these athletes shown. And so here's going to be JC Van de Zilver going diagonally.
All right, so forgive me, I lost my place.
So that's JC Van de Zilver in the aerial pass. Again, a start value of 10.0 for Van de Zilver.
Forgive me. So you saw her do a round off, 1.5, round off, back handspring to a whip to a full there, 360 at the end. So good execution overall. Again, from our angle, we can see some little tiny things, legs apart. It looked like she had good continuity through the pass. Another thing that is part of tumbling is acceleration. And so think about continuity as making sure that everything stays at a continuing pace. But in acceleration in a tumbling pass, everything should mount up to that final skill. So you don't want to see, you want to be able to see that, you don't see that slow down consistently down. So the continuity is kind of when there's a break in the skills. The acceleration is making sure that the pass continues to build speed up to that final element at the end of the pass.
We're now going to move to the 6-element pass. It's going to be Fairmont State competing with a 9.95 start value. It's going to be Sofia Del Greco.
So Coach Guthrie told us that this is an upgrade for Sophia. She'd been scoring really well. She had an injury mid-season, so had to back down to a pass at a lower value, but has re-upped that here today. to come out with a 995. So seeing that front tumbling, the front tuck, front handspring, another front tuck, round off, back handspring, 1.5. So a really fun pass incorporating that front tumbling. Front tumbling is required to see some of that in the synchronized passes as well as the individual passes.
As we look into the replay one more time.
Yeah, it's tough to catch her on the corner there. So she comes through those front tumbling skills into the round off back handspring 1.5. And just, all that power towards the end of the skill there, you can see the landing on the step. But overall, potentially there should be a little more height through the middle of that pass on those skills, see the rise of those skills. But overall, a really great pass, and I'm sure she's going to be pleased that she got to compete that higher start value and really showcase her skills here at the championship.
And again, this is really impressive what these student athletes are doing. They're generating all the power themselves. This isn't a springboard. This isn't like gymnastics. This board, they are generating all the power themselves as the student athletes. And it's just so impressive to see the power they get while tumbling. For the sixth element tumbling event for Azusa Pacific, Jessica Gill is going to be doing it this time. So we go from one All-American to another All-American.
So we saw a little bit more of that front tumbling. She entered the pass with a front tuck, straight to the round off back handspring 1.5 and a round off full. So you see the front tuck entering round off 1.5 into the round off 360. So overall, good continuity through the pass. You can see a little bit of a tiny little break there, but great pass. She's a really powerful tumbler. And another angle here, we can see the pass coming right down to the corner of the mat. That 360, you see the height that she got there. A little bit of a side step on the landing, so there'll be some small deductions there.
Yeah, and that was Jessica Gill. She was the NCATA Division II Athlete of the Year. And I think this is one of the coolest parts about acrobatics and tumbling is that you have Division I, Division II, and Division III schools all competing with each other. And then you also have Division I, Division II, and Division III awards in the sport.
We do. It was actually JC Van de Silver who was the D2 Athlete of the Year. But Jessica Gill is, I believe, an All-American. And, an incredible athlete all around. But yes, all of the competition takes place across divisions as we're going through this emerging sport process. Here we have Alexis Smith. So you saw her do a round off 3 whips, 2 back handsprings into the 1.5. And the 10.0 start value for the event for Fairmont State. So the challenge of putting 3 whips together is maintaining that same body position, traveling the same distance like we talked about, maintaining that speed or accelerating it. So she does a great job there in connecting those 3 whips straight to 2 back handsprings to be able to elevate and finalize that 1.5 at the end.
So that's Alexis Smith, the 5th-year senior from Parkersburg, West Virginia. And that was the open pass. She had a 10.0 start value, which was their highest start value in the tumbling event. Azusa Pacific, they're again going to have a start value of 10 in the open pass. They're going to send out McKenna Dawson, who's a freshman for Azusa Pacific, and even just talking to head coach Kara Willard, she was really, really high, McKenna Dawson.
Yeah, you got to love McKenna's energy. You have such intense competitors in the senior class here at Azusa Pacific, and McKenna brings a whole different level of energy. And she's a really powerful tumbler. Do a round off, 3 whips into a 1.5. And the height that we've been talking about all day, seeing that. A great reaction. Very pleased with that heat, and she should be. So again, we're talking about her bubbly personality and her bounce. She's got a lot of bounce in her tumbling pass as well. So you saw her do that round off 3, putting those 3 whips together like we talked about. A back handspring and really elevating that final skill so she can get that full rotation, take a nice controlled step there at the end. So I think that's going to be a good score for McKenna Dawson.
So that'll do it for the tumbling event. The scores are being calculated right now, so we're going to step aside and take another break. But when we come back, we're going to introduce the scores for the tumbling event, and we'll introduce the team event, which is 2 minutes and 45 seconds of organized chaos here at the NCATA National Championships. Just wrapped up the tumbling event, and the scores are in. So let's look at the scores right now. For Azusa Pacific, 9.675 out of 10.00 in the duo, 8.675 out of 8.95 for Fairmont State. In the trio, 8.725 out of 9.40 for Azusa, 9.00 out of 9.40 for Fairmont State, 8.400 out of 9.55 in the quad for Azusa Pacific, 8.450 for Fairmont State, 9.800 out of 10 for Azusa in the aerial solo portion, 9.150 for Fairmont State out of 9.55, 9.825 out of 10 for Azusa in the 6 element, 9.700 out of 9.95 for Fairmont State, 9.850 out of 10 for Azusa in the open, 9.825 in the open for Fairmont State. That brings the total to 56.275 out of 58.95 for Azusa, 54.800 out of 56.95 for Fairmont State. Azusa Pacific 181.200, 173.725, and that will be the score through the first 5 events, but we still have one more event to go, and it's 2 minutes and 45 seconds of organized chaos. Let's run you through the team event.
The last event is the team event.
This is a very fast-paced event, so be sure to keep your eyes peeled.
The team event features up to 24 athletes on the floor, performing synchronized acro, pyramid, toss, and tumbling in a routine set to music lasting no more than 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
In the team event, the officials are looking for the stability of the structures, body positioning, and the technique of the tumbling.
In the final event of the afternoon, the team routine combines all skills executed thus far.
So for Fairmont State, they're going to have a 102.03 start value. Here's Fairmont State in the team event.
Now in team event, we're going to see all of these skill categories we've seen throughout the meet put together in the organized chaos that you mentioned. And there's requirements in each skill category. 30 acro elements, 4 pyramids, 5 tosses, 21 standing and running tumbling passes each. Many of those have to be synchronized, so it's a lot of fun. We'll see you on the flip side.
So that was Fairmont State in the team event. A lot of smiles, a lot of really great skills being performed. That looked really, really good.
A really great performance overall. I know they're going to be really happy with that. They had really no major errors. I did see the red flag go up by the head official, so there will be some sort of neutral penalty assessed. So that may be that a requirement was missing, or there might have been something that was intended to be executed that was executed differently. So we'll find out a little bit more about that. But the overall, you know, everything, the execution was really clean, and Coach Coutry talked a lot about things that they had upgraded for today, and so I know they're going to be really proud that they did so well in their standing and running tumbling that they upgraded. You saw some excitement around the extended acro at the back of the mat, where they moved from a two-man extended position to the one-man, and you saw how excited they were when they hit that. That was something that they added to increase their difficulty for the national championship event. So it's really fun to see them come out and, you know, knowing that they've got a big hill to climb, but that they did the absolute best that they could do today out on the floor is going to be really satisfying.
They do have a big hill with Azusa Pacific currently leading 181.20 to 173.725. And I guess at this time, could you just describe how big of a lead that is in acrobatics and tumbling?
That's a pretty big lead. You know, it's tough to make up that many points unless Azusa has a lot of major errors. So that it is a tough one. You know, stranger things have happened, but it's a very big lead. You know, usually in a meet going into or a team event, you have differing values in team events, so that can be a factor. But this is, you know, let's see. Let me do the mental math really quick. Was it 8 points? About 8 points?
It's about 8 points.
That's a lot of points.
Yeah. And Fairmont State, they have a start value that's actually over 5 less than Azusa Pacific, which is really hard to make up ground. But at the same time, they're a 7 seed that came out here and they're competing to the best of their ability. This was a team that talked about setting goals at the beginning of the year, and they were able to reach a lot of the goals. They wanted to make it to the national championship, and well, they met that goal. They were able to reach the national championship. Their first goal of the year, they wanted to win the Mountain East. They won the Mountain East again. And so despite having this big deficit in the national championship, I think this season is an absolute success for Fairmont State.
Absolutely, and we haven't talked much about event finals, but you know, coming out and doing your very best in this quarterfinal meet gives you an opportunity to qualify for the event finals. And so we'll see where all those scores shake out at the end of the day. But no doubt they should be very proud of what they accomplished today, and hopefully they'll see some of their, some of their groups and individuals in event finals on Saturday.
Here's Azusa Pacific in the team event. That was Azusa Pacific wrapping up the team event. Again, they had a start value of 107.19. And Kara Willard, talking to her yesterday, she said this team has been the most solid team that she's ever coached in the team event. And I think the Cougars ended night number 1 on a pretty good note.
Absolutely. You know, they came out, there were no major errors. You know, we saw in the first meet, both teams had some falls. Neither of these teams had falls that I saw. But it's going to come down to all those little technical execution of all of this breadth of skill work that they have to do. So we saw a few errors, you know, in standing, tumbling. You know, there's some synchronization pieces. They have a lot of passes that are going in duos and trios, so that's a lot of potential synchronization, landings, those types of things. Their tosses looked really strong in their acro sequence. The group to the far left had a little bit of trouble getting up, but got to that position and held it. They did have a pyramid that came down a little bit early, so there'll be some hold deductions there and some execution deductions that go along with that. And then, you know, with running tumbling, again, with the volume of running tumbling, all the, you know, maybe the landings that are a little bit low or the steps, some stumbles, the continuity of those passes, all of that factors in as we go ahead and we get these meets or get tighter. Those are the technical things that they're going to want to clean up as they move ahead in this tournament.
So Azusa Pacific currently leading 181.20 to Fairmont State's 173.725. We're going to step aside one more time as they tally up the team event scores, but when we come back, we'll announce the winner and see who moves on here at the NCATA National Championships. Welcome back inside the Matthew Knight Arena, and we're still awaiting the team score overall, but let's just walk you through the schedule for the NCATA National Championships. Earlier today, Gannon defeated number 6 Limestone 266.700 to 261.105. We're awaiting the results for the team event, which will tell us the winner of Azusa Pacific versus Fairmont State, but Azusa Pacific currently with a demanding lead. Right after this meet, we'll have number 1 Baylor versus number 8 Converse, and then the nightcap, number 4 Quinnipiac versus number 5 Oregon. That one should be really, really exciting, and I think that 2022 and having this national championship is a really great thing for the sport. You know, we haven't had a tournament take place in several years, and this is the first time the community is back together here in Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah, it's been, you know, been a tumultuous few years for us all, and you know, in 2020 we saw the tournament intended to be here in Eugene canceled. We were able to have an abbreviated tournament last year at Baylor University in Waco, but only 4 teams qualifying and no event finals. So you know, it is nice. It's nice to be back to the full tournament. Event finals is one of the most fun things. One of my favorite things all year. Because we get to see we'll see some at-large qualifiers, teams that didn't qualify here. They have an opportunity to qualify through the regular season by posting the highest score throughout the regular season. So we'll get to see some new faces and new names here on Saturday. But yeah, it's bringing the community back together. You know, it's been quite an evolution for the sport, you know, in just over a decade, going from a dream to the realization of NCAA emerging sports status, and now reaching a really big benchmark with over 40 programs that are sponsoring acrobatics and tumbling across all divisions across the country. So it's always special to be together and celebrate what this community has accomplished and how far they've come together.
Absolutely, and the sport continues to grow to at heights that really, when you started the sport, you didn't think that the sport would be at this level, especially in a decade, and it's been so amazing to see. We finally have the scores being announced here at Matthew Knight Arena. And so for the team event, Azusa Pacific gonna wrap up the night with an 86.740 compared to Fairmont State's 84.430. So with that, Azusa Pacific's going to defeat Fairmont State 267.940 to 257.115. Janelle, what are your final thoughts for this meet between the 7 versus the 2 seed?
Well, I thought it was a great matchup. You know, I think Fairmont achieved, at the highest potential that they could. I think Azusa made a few mistakes that they're going to want to clean up as they move into that semifinal match, but I have no doubt from what Coach Willard shared about their resolve and their determination that they're going to come back ready tomorrow to take on their next opponent.
So the 2 seed, Azusa Pacific, will move on. They're going to face off against the 3 seeded Gannon Knights, who just defeated Limestone today. That one should be a very exciting one. That'll be taking place tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. As the number 1 ranked Baylor Bears are taking on the number 8 seeded Converse. And Converse, their coach, Keaton Johnson, she actually competed at Baylor under Fee Mulkey, so a little bit of friendly rivalry right there. But coming up in about 30 minutes, Baylor versus Converse here at the NCATA National Championships.